Your Excellency, Zaki Nusseibeh, Minister of State for Public and Cultural Diplomacy and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the UAE, a special thanks to you for being with us today. We are really honored to have with us such an outstanding representative of the government of the UAE and of the Emirati and Arab culture, as well as a close friend to Italy. Regards also to my friend Omar Shamsi in Rome, and warm welcome to our distinguished panelists and to the public. Un caloroso saluto al pubblico italiano. Let me just say a few words on the rationale of this initiative. Why dialogues on innovation, the pandemic, human civilization, the limits of technology? Well, nobody can dispute the invaluable role played by innovation and technology in keeping alive our economies and societies and helping us as individuals to stay connected to each other, first during the lockdown and then during these physically distanced months, as we are doing right today. However, over time, we are realizing that in the long run, technology can hardly replace the physical interaction between people, the physical sharing of spaces, activities, experiences. Indeed, there is no distance learning that does not jeopardize the fundamental part of education, that is sociality. There is no smart working that in the long term does not risk affecting the capability of innovate, which stems from direct contacts between people, and especially from meeting new people, which is quite difficult to do through these platforms. And there is no virtual show that can replace the emotion and thrills transmitted by the physical presence of artists and their works. The challenge, in other words, is to understand how much humanity we are giving up in exchange for technology, and whether this trade-off, necessary in an emergency phase, is sustainable in the context of a rediscovered normality. We really hope that the dialogues can indeed contribute to this reflection. Let me finally remind that this initiative, the dialogues, are actually the first initiative organized by the new Italian Cultural Institute in Abu Dhabi, that the Italian government recently established with the objective to strengthen institutional and people-to-people relations between Italy and UAE, as well as to support UAE's role as a global connecting hub between civilizations and culture, also in view of Expo 2020. So thanks a lot to the Italian Cultural Institute for organizing this event, to all the staff, thanks to all the participants, and I give you back the floor. Thank you.
A special thank you, Ambassador Nicola Lener. And it is now an honor to give the floor to His Excellency Zaki Nusseibeh, or Nusseibeh, as everybody here says. We are really delighted to have you with us. Please, Excellency.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. His Excellency Nicola Lener, the Ambassador of the Italian Republic to the United Arab Emirates, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Let me first of all say how happy and privileged I feel in welcoming the first major initiative undertaken by the newly established Istituto di Cultura in the Italian culture in the UAE under the able leadership of Professor Ida Zilio-Grandi, a renowned Orientalist, scholar, and author. I know from a number of meetings with her that the UAE will soon witness a number of important cultural exchanges between our two countries, and I look forward with great enthusiasm to her present and future contributions that will no doubt enrich our cultural horizon and consolidate friendship between our two peoples. It is often said that a nation's true mettle is revealed in the way it faces adversity. We in the UAE are proud that our collective response to the COVID-19 crisis, a vicious pandemic that has decimated the global economy, causing great suffering and loss across large sections of the world population, was both determined and successful. Our government was able to fully mitigate the outbreak of this contagious disease within our own borders, while extending a hand of assistance and help to other countries. This is because we believe that overcoming such a global calamity requires true collaboration across nations, and that we are as safe as our weakest members. This conviction, rooted in our core values as a nation, is reflected in our full support of the World Health Organization and our unwavering provision of aid to vulnerable communities around the world. As of end August, the UAE has provided more than 1,300 tons of food and medical aid to more than 111 countries, with over 1.3 million medical professionals assisted across the globe. This speaks to the country's unwavering support to cross-border collaboration and multilateral action, especially in times of crises. Our government's success in mitigating the effects of COVID-19 is a reflection of its long-standing policy to co-opt the newest technologies and innovations in order to create a knowledge-based economy that can face the challenges of the future. As an example, a world-class digitalized infrastructure enabled our entire student population to move to e-learning seamlessly. Our businesses adapted to the new COVID-19 world by moving much of its transactions online. We were able to convene international conferences virtually. Our government services continued to be offered through e-government without causing any disruption to public or business life. In the past few years, the UAE has managed to transform itself into a global platform for innovation which embraces talent and inspires its own as well as Arab youth to harness modern science and technology for the good of humanity. Our story of success over the last 50 years is a testimony to our determination as we celebrate sending the first Arab probe to Mars and enjoy the benefits of renewable and nuclear energy to prepare for the next 50 years with equal ambitions and resolve. And as the world learns to cope with this new pandemic, we in the UAE move forward in our advanced planning to work with other nations in testing an innovative vaccine that could mitigate its terrible legacy. Of course, this procedure is being made possible because of the new technologies employed, utilizing artificial intelligence in a way that will set tomorrow's agenda. But we know, of course, that technology is not a panacea for all our problems, nor is it totally harmless. There will always be threats associated with the rapid development of digitalization and the amassing of personal metadata by global monopolies in the new virtual world we live in. Governments, together with the private sector, must both work together to mitigate the threats inherent in the system, a process I know that the United Nations, with the active participants of the UAE, is already engaged in. And as His Excellency has pointed out, we cannot totally live in a new virtual world, must learn how to move seamlessly between the two systems. Physical contact, which is a necessity for our human encounters, as well as using the active technology of tomorrow to enable our businesses and our societies, communities to survive. And finally, I am confident that despite the great travails of the period we are going through today, humanity will be able in the end to prevail as it did in the past, and that we learn from our experiences so as to build a better world for our children and our grandchildren. Grazie mille. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your kindness, Excellency, and for your insightful words. And now let's move on to today's topic. From Covidiots to Quaranteam, Linguistic Changes in the Time of Pandemic. Even the language, the words, the expressions we use to communicate our thoughts, our feelings, even the language has suffered a shock at the time of the pandemic. For example, expressions such as going viral or contagious enthusiasm have almost completely disappeared because we suddenly felt them as linguistic taboos. At the same time, to indicate the pandemic and our reactions to it, many war metaphors have appeared everywhere in all languages. Before, for many reasons, we felt they were no longer appropriate, not to mention new words which continue to pop up in all languages. Massimo Leone is a professor at the University of Turin, where he teaches semiotics, the science of the signs, of their production, their transmission, and their interpretation. Briefly, the science of human communication. We have recently read and greatly appreciated some reflections of yours, Professor Leone, precisely on the theme of the pandemic. So we look forward to hearing your suggestions on this topic. Please.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm deeply thankful and honored to be surrounded by such distinguished speakers. And it's a really a graceful invitation. So it's a great and deep honor to take part into this discussion. So without further ado, language is the essential cognitive resource of human beings. Through it, human beings can better cope with a changing environment. When change is fast, language changes rapidly too. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the entire world in a few months. There is no surprise then that new or renewed words, expressions, and signs have mushroomed as a consequence. Some of them were technical. Governments and institutions officially adopted them to designate the new situation and responses to it. The same word pandemic, but also lockdown, self-isolating, quarantine, social distancing, key workers, shelter in place, confinement. These words and expressions already existed, but gained new momentum and significance in 2020, often with the new semantics. The choice of words, especially when official, was rarely neutral. In some countries, for instance, the categorical expression lockdown was replaced by the somehow gentler confinement, like in the French confinement. Similarly, the expressions work from home, teleworking, smart working, or like in the Italian administration, lavoro agile, agile working, have different nuances. Technical words and definitions also proliferated so that not only epidemiologists now know the difference between contagious and infectious, not only ER doctors can distinguish between a ventilator and a respirator, and not only statisticians know the meaning of flattened curve or clusters. Abbreviations too, the so-called coronacronyms, multiplied from PPE, personal protective equipment, to WFH, working from home. The most common item of the COVID-19 pandemic, the medical face mask, was also designated with different terms in the various languages, from the Italian mascherina to the Spanish in Latin America, tapabocca. And some designations have been polemical, like the Spanish bozal, which names the medical face mask like a muzzle so as to stress its supposedly repressive meaning. Language has shown even more creativity in the private domain. The pandemic has affected almost every aspect of the personal and social life. So new words and expressions were coined in response, often with a humorous, ironic undertone. When all is lost, indeed, language provides the most formidable tool to cope with an otherwise untreatable reality, the tool of irony. Linguistically, many of the new terms were wordplays based on the terms COVID and Corona. The new words were created to name new categories of individuals in terms of age and cultural epoch. For instance, the Covidiots, that is the generation of children born between November 2020 and June 2021. A synonym for Covidiots is Coronials, which, by the way, and I'm saying it to our colleague FREEK, was coined by rapper Lil Darby in his 2020 rap song COVID Thirst. Another synonym is Corona babies, but then also the term quarantines started to circulate. That is, children born between 2001 and 2007 who were technically teenagers during the COVID-19 quarantine period in 2020. And then finally, also the more encompassing word Covidians emerged with an N as Naples. That is, those who lived through the global COVID-19 pandemic. We are all Covidians now. Another group of new words were created not to designate the generations affected by the virus, but the types of behavior people would display during the pandemic, going from those fearing a corona apocalypse, also called the coronageddon, to those who, mostly teenagers, that is quarantines, would adopt the slogan quarantine and chill after the already existing Netflix and chill, and nicknamed the virus Miss Rona or simply Rona, and even marked a different generational attitude to it by calling it the boomer remover. Many of the new terms in this category were, of course, ironic and derogatory. There's a Covidiot is now globally someone who ignores the warnings and rules regarding public health or safety. But also expressions in this category included moronavirus, a synonym for Covidiot, as well as its antonym quarantared, that is a person who is unnecessarily afraid during the COVID pandemic. Or the more neutral COVID head, slang for the feeling of being entirely overtaken mentally and emotionally by stress due to the coronavirus pandemic. Other ironic expressions include COVID-38, a person who has been unlucky enough to contract the COVID-19 virus twice, but also some more positive terms like quarantina. Quarantina in English is slang for a woman who learns to cope with life in the age of the coronavirus without the help of men, but cultivating personal and new talents like art, literature, or meditation. But probably the largest and most humorous family of COVID-related words is that of terms that ironically designate ways of coping with lockdowns and with the new normality, also called Covidianity with another neologism. So for instance, new cocktails were named Quarantini after the martini, or Coronarita after the margarita, the web aperitif, the virtual happy hour, but also the quarantine from quarantine plus moonshine, that is the hand sanitizer made by many famous distilleries, including some previously producing martini during the COVID-19 event. No aspect of everyday life was spared the cultural contagion of the pandemic, so that some started to talk about Covidism as an attitude to think about everything in relation to the virus, and in the academe about post-coronial status. Even the adjective Covidi was coined as an attribute of everything that relates to the pandemic. Indeed, the new conditions altered everything. Quarantine is the word to designate that special pandemic time in which all days seem to blend together, undistinguishable from each other. It is also designated as Blur's Day, not Monday, not Tuesday, but Blur's Day, a day in which all traditional days seem to blur. Also, sentimental and social relations, of course, changed significantly. I can mention the fact that marriages sometimes did not survive the lockdowns, giving rise to the now so-called COVID divorces, also called after Brexit's Covexits, and Zamping, designating the particular unpleasant but quite common experience of getting dumped during the quarantine through Zoom or other video conference app. I could go on and on. Covidcation, coronation, quarantino, quarantine. Quarantine is, by the way, the time that one gets with a face mask on. Quarantigue, it is the fatigue from quarantine. Quaranteam, which is the group of people who join together in order to leave the quarantine together. COVID-10, COVID-15, COVID-20 designated the number of pounds that one gets eating too much food during the quarantine. But also covidity, which is the newly acquired ability to express emotions without using the lower half of the face for emotional expressions. Let me just conclude by saying that new words will continue to emerge as humanity faces the global challenge and seeks to respond to it through science in search for vaccination, but also through language in search for suitable representations of what is happening. What a planet will need in the forthcoming months may perhaps be expressed with a new neologism, which I would like to launch today. The world affected by COVID needs covidence, which is a kind of providence, but also the ability of being covidence, the ability to see together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Leone, for your rich, your stimulating, and also entertaining insights. Now we're going to listen to Dr. Mohamed Safi Al Mosteghanemi, well-known linguist, Secretary General of Majma' al-Lugha al-Arabiyya al-Shariqa, the Arabic Language Academy of Sharjah. Dr. Safi is a member of the Arabic Language Advisory Board and much more. Dr. Safi, you will give us your point of view as a scholar of the Arabic language. So I thank you for being here, also on behalf of the Italian Arabic students who are following us from Italy. Please, Dr. Safi.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Ida Zilio, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Zaki Nusseibeh, His Excellency. Also, I thank His Excellency Nicola, the Ambassador of the Republic of Italy. I am very pleased and delighted to participate with you in this first webinar. Of course, in Majma' al-Lugha al-Arabiyya al-Shariqa, we are following the changes of the words, expressions, phrases, new, which emerged in this period. So, coronavirus, as you know all, has led to an explosion of new words and phrases in the world, in all languages, and of course in Arabic language. All what our friend Dr. Leone said now in English or in Italian language or in French, we have it in Arabic language too. But I prepared some examples, and I will just try to present it to you. And if you want more explanation in Arabic language, I will do it. Coronavirus has led to a big explosion, I said. This new vocabulary helps us make sense of the changes that have been suddenly become part of our daily life. We have new terms, new expressions, for example, as self-isolating, pandemic, quarantine, lockdown, social distancing. All these in English, we have it in Arabic. We have, for example, al-amal an bu'd, al-tabaud al-jasadi. We have, for example, many phrases and group of noun now emerge. Now we are talking about ri'aya lahiqa. Ri'aya lahiqa, what we mean, aftercare. Aftercare, when we care and follow-up support dedicated to the patient after leaving the hospital, for example. Now we are talking in our news about عدوى منقولة بالهواء. عدوى منقولة بالهواء. Airborne infection. Before a few months, if you said this phrase, you can't imagine what does it mean. But now it's common. عدوى منقولة بالهواء, the spread of small particulates that can be transmitted through air. So we have a lot of phrases and expressions in Arabic language. And we have also metaphors, excellent metaphors. When we listen to the news now, for example, in Algeria, in Morocco, they said this phrase or group of noun, they said, Al-Jaysh al-Abyad. Al-Jaysh al-Abyad, they mean doctors and nurses who are in the front line fighting against coronavirus. So, amazing. Before a few months, if you said the Jaysh al-Abyad, perhaps you will think about contrary of Al-Jaysh al-Ahmar or something like this in politics. But now, Al-Jaysh al-Abyad, doctors and nurses, and they are repeating, and everyone understands this kind of expression and metaphor. So, even in English, when we said Covidio party, Covidio party, that means online parties via Zoom, via Skype. So many expressions and phrases emerged in this period. What we, and already linguists and rhetorical researchers started analyzing all these kind of expressions and phrases. This is one. Also, the scope of lexical innovation in relations to coronavirus is really unprecedented. In 6-7 months, we have a huge number of words, of group of words, and everybody is talking about. So this era, and this period of coronavirus has big impact in the language, in Arabic and in all other languages. Perhaps one of the biggest factors in the spread of coronavirus terminology is the fact that we are more connected now. We are more connected. So everybody is understanding what others are talking about. Instant access social media is now an integral part of our lives, and we share content with friends, families, through a variety of social media outlets. Just a few months ago, terms like social distancing, pandemic, as I said, we can't imagine or think about the meaning. How we talk and the words we use on a daily basis have been rapidly and profoundly affected by the coronavirus crisis. Also, what I want to mention in the language field, the changes have been so significant that many academic institutions announced that they are updating their dictionaries. I have friends from Morocco, Majlis Tansiq al-Ta'rib min al-Ribat, the Academy of Arabization in Ribat. Already they have done and they prepared a new dictionary, Arabic, French, English, about all terminology in this field. And they sent it to me. As I've said, now I want just to make a little, or I give more attention to some metaphor. When we say قمة الانتشار باللغة العربية ذروة الانتشار قمة الانتشار, in English the apex. So this one also, it's familiar now. We have, for example, التنفس الاصطناعي, artificial respiration. We have, now we are talking about تقنيات التعقيم. تقنيات التعقيم, aseptic techniques. But before we were talking about educational techniques. Educational technique, not aseptic technique. So we have a group of noun also in Arabic. عديم الألوان. عديم الأعراض. عديم الأعراض, asymptomatic, that means a person who doesn't show any symptoms and he can transfer or he can spread the disease. Also, what we recognize in these new words and the new terms, we see words and expressions coming from the word dictionary. That means معدل الهجوم, معدل الهجوم, attack rate. We see also إغلاق الحدود, إغلاق الحدود, border closure. We see also معدل الإماتة, معدل الفتك, معدل الإماتة. This is case fatality rate. And we understand it easily because we are living this pandemic. Also, we have, like we say, مخالطة مباشرة, مخالطة مباشرة, close contact. We have حالة مؤكدة, حالة مثبتة, confirmed case. I enjoy when they say in the news, we are نحن نتتبع ونقتفي المخالطين. اقتفاء المخالطين. What do we mean by اقتفاء المخالطين? Contact tracing. Contact tracing. We are following their traces. So many words and many excellent metaphors or expressions are born and we are using, and before a few months ago, we can't think about it. This is what I want to participate, and if you have any question in Arabic language, I can give you more and more details. Thank you for giving me this chance to talk about the Arabic language or the impact of the crisis on the Arabic language. Thank you, sister.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safi. We have personally, but I think everybody, we have learned a lot from you. I appreciate it very much when you mentioned Al-Jaysh al-Abyad, the White Army, for indicating doctors and nurses, and many things that we really appreciate it very much. And now our last guest speaker of today, last but of course not least, is Mustafa Ismail, alias FREEK, artist, musician, a well-known rapper in the UAE. Dear FREEK, we really appreciate your music, the words of your music, of your songs, and also, but this is a personal comment, the fact that you like to wear Italian fashion. We all know that every good rapper works and plays a lot with words, so having your point of view is crucial for us. Please, FREEK.
First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Ida, for having me, especially around doctors and professors. Allah yahfadkum. I'm not close to being any professor or doctor, but I learned a lot to be on this, the first webinar. My point of view definitely is going to be from an artist point of view, especially in 2019. It was a crazy and very packed year with a lot of performances, especially from the summer until December. We did a tour in the Middle East. We went to Europe and we came back here to Abu Dhabi. And what happened on March and Feb, it kind of changed all our perspective and having, especially performing. The first performance I've done, which is a virtual show, and it was kind of totally 100% different than what we usually do, especially having interaction with people, and the audience is definitely why we do music. you know, and that was kind of it was kind of like, let's just say it was something new for us to actually witness. And then we started doing it more and more. People started enjoying it and actually tuning in to these performances. And actually, technology gave us something that we took for granted at the beginning, which is actually we can do music and collab with a lot of artists from different regions. And it was kind of difficult to do it in the past, but now when human found the need of doing apps and more softwares, I feel like they gave the people to push technology to our service, where now I can do everything without even moving a hand in my house. I can have my music to be mixed and mastered, and I don't have to actually meet anyone, and I can do it online, which is kind of something new for us. And to be honest, my little brother, he started school now in September, and I was witnessing him the first time. I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes, because for me, it was kind of interesting. I wanted to see the e-learning, how it's going, and him actually waking up and just be in front of the computer. I felt like my brother was already used to actually being in front of the computer, because he's always in front of the games. That if he's not studying, he's in front of the game, in front of the computer. So it kind of didn't really change a lot. Where I think in school, the first thing I learned, which is being social was the first thing I learned in school. So I feel like how I'm not surprised, but I'm waiting to see how kids will actually cope with that, being not social, just doing everything through e-learning. And I find it a bit interesting. Right now, I think for me as an artist, I think we can actually have shows and performances without being in front of the audience. That kind of, it's a plus for all of us. And I hope, and I think this will actually change in the next 3-4 months. Like Professor Massimo said, it's like everyone will actually cope with it normally without having anxiety towards that. And I would like to keep my my dialogue a bit short, so we can have a back and forth conversation with the attendees.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mustafa, Ismail, FREEK, and thanks to everyone, to our guest speakers, because with their observations, with their suggestions, with their stimulating remarks, they made us learn a lot. And thank you, public, for following. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, 22, at the same time. Our topic will be men, survival versus well-being. Our guests will be Telmo Pievani, evolutionist, professor at the University of Padua, Fabio Piano, late provost in NYU Abu Dhabi, biologist, also professor in NYU New York, and Dr. Mariam Ketait, family doctor and well-being designer. See you soon then.